The Viridian Empire glittered like a jewel in the vastness of space, its metallic spires reaching toward distant stars as if to claim them. At its heart lay Viridian Prime, home to the greatest warriors in known galaxies, and among them stood Jar-Na, her azure skin glistening under the 3 pale moons, her icy gaze sweeping across the Danteum arena, where 52 challengers had fallen before her blade. Tonight marked her ascension. The crowds roared, their voices a thunderous wave crashing against the ancient metal walls of the stadium. 50,000 Viridians, their skin in various shades of blue, raised their ceremonial daggers in salute. The air smelled of metal and blood and victory. "Behold!" The Grand Counselor's voice boomed across the Danteum. "Jar-Na the undefeated, 52 trials, 52 victories. No warrior before has achieved such glory." Jar-Na stood motionless, her twin blades, crafted from the bones of her first kill, crossed before her chest in the traditional stance of honor. Her face betrayed nothing, though inside a familiar emptiness gnawed at her. Each victory had been meant to fill the void, yet it only seemed to deepen with every fallen opponent. The Grand Counselor continued, his elaborate headdress of precious metals catching the light. "Tonight, she shall be crowned Supreme Warrior of the Viridian Empire. May her—" "I challenge her right." A powerful voice cut through the ceremony. The crowd fell silent. Jar-Na's eyes narrowed as she recognized the voice before its owner even stepped into the light. General Korak emerged from the shadows, her muscular frame adorned with medals of conquests, scars of honor crisscrossing her deep sapphire skin. She was older than Jar-Na by 20 cycles, a legend in her own right, and Jar-Na's most bitter rival since their training days. "By ancient law, I challenge the ascension," Korak declared, addressing not Jar-Na, but the council. "No warrior may be crowned supreme until they have defeated their greatest enemy." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The challenge was rare but sacred. Jar-Na's grip tightened on her blades. "You are not my greatest enemy, Korak. You are merely my oldest one." Korak smiled, revealing teeth filed to points, a mark of the old warrior caste. "Then prove it. Little fish, defeat me, and I shall pledge myself to you. My life force, my soul, bound to yours as the ancient texts demand." The crowd gasped. Such a pledge was the ultimate surrender, rarely offered in modern times. It would mean Korak's essence would become one with Jar-Na's upon death, an eternal subservience. Jar-Na hesitated, her mind racing. Victory would mean absolute validation of her superiority. It would be the culmination of everything she had fought for. "And if you win?" she asked, voice steady despite the tension coiling within her. Korak's smile widened. "Then you pledge yourself to me, the strongest, as I believe you've always secretly wanted." The accusation stung because it carried a grain of truth. Since childhood, Jar-Na had been taught to revere strength above all. To bind oneself to the strongest warrior was the ultimate honor. "I accept," Jar-Na declared, raising her blades. "I shall defeat you, and your essence will serve mine for eternity." The council members nodded in approval, already moving to clear the ceremonial platform for combat when a commotion at the Danteum's main entrance drew everyone's attention. "Stop!" A small figure pushed through the guards, stumbling into the arena. "I request intervention." The intruder was like nothing Jar-Na had ever seen. Pale skin, not blue but a strange beige pink. No visible weapons. Clothed in what appeared to be simple fabric rather than the standard metal-infused armor. A human. The crowd erupted in laughter and jeers. Humans were known to the Viridians as a nascent spacefaring species, curious but weak, more scholars than warriors. "Who dares interrupt the sacred challenge?" the Grand Counselor demanded. The human straightened, displaying surprising dignity despite being surrounded by hostile warriors. "I am Dr. Mara Ellis of Earth, xenopsychologist and diplomatic emissary. I have studied your magnificent culture for years and request the right of spiritual combat in place of physical confrontation." More laughter, louder this time. Spiritual combat was an ancient, almost forgotten tradition, one that tested the mind and soul rather than the body. "Ridiculous," Korak spat. "The human thinks to challenge our ways with talk and emotions." But Jarna found herself intrigued. She stepped forward, her movement silencing the crowd. "Explain yourself, human. What is this spiritual combat you propose?" Dr. Mara Ellis met her gaze without flinching, a feat few could manage. "A neural connection, a battle of minds and memories rather than blades. I propose that true strength lies not in killing, but in understanding." "And why would we entertain such nonsense?" Korak demanded. The human smiled. "Because it is the greater challenge. Anyone can swing a blade, General. But can you face your own mind, your own past, your own truths?" A hush fell over the Danteum. The human had just delivered the ultimate insult and challenge simultaneously. Korak drew her weapon, a massive curved blade that had cleaved through armies. "I will cut you down where you stand. Vermin." "Wait." Jarna raised her hand. Something in the human's words had touched that empty void within her. The ancient laws permit alternative forms of combat if both challengers agree. "You cannot be serious," Korak growled. "Are you afraid, General?" Jarna countered, her voice carrying across the arena. "Afraid of a battle where brute force cannot save you?" The council members conferred briefly. The oldest among them finally spoke. "The law does indeed allow for spiritual combat. It has not been practiced in 300 cycles, but the protocols remain in our records." Korak's face contorted with rage, but she was bound by tradition. "Fine. Let us engage in this farce. When I crush this human's mind and yours, it will prove that Viridian strength prevails in all forms of combat." Dr. Mara Ellis nodded solemnly. "The battle will commence in 3 standard days, allowing for proper preparation. I will need access to your neural interface technology." As the council agreed to the terms, Jarna found herself studying the strange human. There was something in those alien eyes, a depth, an understanding that unsettled her. For the first time in 52 victories, Jarna felt uncertain about the outcome of a challenge. The human met her gaze again and spoke softly, too low for others to hear. "You seek something that combat cannot give you. Warrior Jarna. Perhaps in my mind, you will find what you're looking for." The word sent an unfamiliar chill down Jarna's spine. Not fear. She had purged that emotion during her first trial, but something equally disquieting. Anticipation. Perhaps. Or recognition. As the human was escorted away to prepare, Jarna stared at her own reflection in her blade. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw not herself, but the face of another. Her twin, Lyrin, whose blood had been the first to stain these very weapons. The memory vanished as quickly as it had surfaced, pushed back into the darkness where she had buried it long ago. But something told her that in 3 days, there would be nowhere left to hide from the truth. Over the next 3 days, Viridian Prime buzzed with anticipation. News of the unprecedented challenge spread throughout the Empire. Many considered it an insult to their traditions, Others found themselves curious about this new form of combat. Jarna spent the time in isolation, meditating in her chambers high in the warrior spire. She had tried to research spiritual combat in the ancient texts, but found only vague references. The practice had fallen out of favor centuries ago, deemed too revealing, too intimate for a society that had gradually stripped away emotions in favor of martial prowess. On the morning of the third day, she was summoned to a chamber deep beneath the Danteum. The room was circular, its walls embedded with pulsing neural transmitters. In the center stood two ornate chairs facing each other, connected by a web of glowing neural filaments. Dr. Mara Ellis was already there, conferring quietly with Viridian technicians. The human looked small among the blue-skinned giants, yet carried herself with quiet confidence. "Warrior Jarna," she greeted with a respectful nod. "Thank you for agreeing to this challenge." "I did not agree for your sake, human," Jarna replied coldly. "I agreed, because Korak must be defeated, and her humiliation will be more complete this way." Of course. The human's eyes, brown, Jarna had learned the color was called, showed neither fear nor judgment. "General Korak will join us shortly. Before we begin, I should explain the process." As Dr. Ellis described the neural connection, Jarna's initial dismissiveness gave way to growing concern. The human spoke of memory pathways, emotional centers, and subconscious barriers with the precision of someone intimately familiar with Viridian physiology. "How do you know so much about our neural structure?" Jarna interrupted. "I've dedicated my life to understanding different species' psychological makeups," the human replied. "Your people fascinate me, especially how you've engineered your society to suppress certain emotional responses while enhancing others." Before Jarna could respond, the door slid open and Korak entered, flanked by council guards. The general's face was a mask of contempt. "Let us be done with this charade," she growled. "When do we begin?" "Now," replied Dr. Ellis. "Please, both of you, take your seats." Jarna and Korak sat facing each other. Technicians moved forward, attaching neural filaments to specific points on their heads. The sensation was strange, cold at first, then warm, then nothing at all, as the filaments seemed to meld with their skin. "The connection will be three-way," Dr. Ellis explained, taking a seat positioned between them. "I will guide the process, creating a shared mental space where you will confront each other and yourselves." As the final connections were made, Jarna felt a momentary surge of panic. This was unknown territory. For the first time since childhood, she was entering a battle unprepared. "Begin sequence," ordered the lead technician. The world dissolved around Jarna. Colors blurred, sounds faded, and she felt herself falling into darkness. Then, gradually, a new reality constructed itself around her. She stood on a vast plain under an unfamiliar sky, not the metallic cityscape of Viridian Prime, but an open expanse of what appeared to be grass. She had seen it in educational holograms about conquered worlds. The air smelled different too, rich with organic matter rather than the sterile, metal-tinged atmosphere she was accustomed to. "This is a neutral space," came Dr. Ellis's voice, though the human was nowhere to be seen. "Constructed from elements familiar to both Viridian and human minds." "Where are you, coward?" Korak's voice boomed across the plain. The general appeared, looking as solid as she would in the physical world, though her armor seemed dimmer, less imposing. "I am here." Dr. Ellis materialized several meters away. "And so is Warrior Jarna. But the true battle is not between us three." The sky darkened suddenly. From the clouds emerged faces, Thousands of them, all Viridian, all bearing expressions of pain, fear, or blank resignation. "What trickery is this?" Korak demanded, though her voice had lost some of its edge. "No trick," Dr. Ellis replied gently. "These are the faces from your memories. General, every life you've taken in battle." Jarna watched as Korak staggered, her mental projection showing weakness she would never display physically. Then Jarna gasped as she realized similar faces were appearing around her, her own victims, her own conquered foes. "This proves nothing," Korak snarled, regaining her composure. "A warrior is measured by those they defeat." "Is that so?" Dr. Ellis asked. The landscape shifted again, and they found themselves in a Viridian training facility. Jarna recognized it immediately, the Youth Combat Academy where she had spent her childhood. And there, in the center of the training pit, were two young Viridian girls, identical in appearance, locked in combat. "No," Jarna whispered, trying to turn away. But in this mental realm, she could not escape the memory. The two young warriors, no more than 8 cycles old, fought with the desperation of those who understood the stakes. They were the last 2 candidates in their class, and only one would advance to become a true Viridian warrior. The other would be deemed unworthy. Jarna watched her younger self gain the upper hand against her twin sister. Lyrin. She watched herself hesitate, just for a moment of mercy, of love. And then she watched the training master's cruel nod that conveyed the unspoken command. "Finish it." Young Jarna's face contorted with anguish as she drove her training blade into her sister's heart. "Enough!" present-day Jarna screamed, and the memory froze. "So, this is the great undefeated warrior," Korak mocked, though her voice lacked conviction. "Built on the murder of her own blood. And you, General," Dr. Ellis waved her hand, and the scene changed again. Now they stood in a Viridian throne room from decades past. A younger Korak knelt before the previous emperor, accepting a medal for crushing a peaceful rebellion on a colony world. The images shifted to show the aftermath: civilians executed, children forced into military training. "We all carry our burdens," Dr. Ellis said softly. "But the question is, do we learn from them, or do we use them to justify further harm?" The mental landscape began to shimmer, fragments of other memories breaking through, moments of doubt, of questioning, that both warriors had suppressed throughout their lives. "This is not combat!" Korak roared, her mental projection beginning to fracture around the edges. "This is psychological torture." "This is truth," Dr. Ellis countered, "and truth is the hardest battle of all." The human turned to Jarna. "You've spent your life trying to fill a void left by your sister's death. Each victory, each kill, was meant to prove that her sacrifice was worthwhile, that you deserved to live while she died." Jarna felt something breaking inside her, a dam holding back emotions she had never allowed herself to feel. How? How do you know this?" "Because I see you," Dr. Ellis said simply. "Not the warrior, not the champion, but the child who lost her other half and has been incomplete ever since." The plane around them began to transform again, but this time into something neither Viridian had experienced: images of Earth, of human families embracing, of children playing without combat, of elderly couples holding hands after decades together. "This is what you've forgotten," Dr. Ellis continued. "Connection, compassion, the strength that comes not from domination but from love." "Weakness," Korak spat, but her projection flickered, uncertainty creeping in. "Is it?" Dr. Ellis challenged. "My species has survived wars, plagues, our own violent nature. Not because we became better killers, but because we learned to heal, to forgive, to grow together. Zharna found herself drawn to these images. They awakened something long dormant within her, a yearning for connection that the rigid Viridian society had systematically crushed. Before she could speak, the mental landscape shattered like glass. Zharna felt a violent pull, and suddenly she was back in her physical body, the neural filaments detaching automatically. Korak was already on her feet, rage contorting her features. Deception. The human uses trickery to weaken us. She drew a concealed blade from her armor. I will end this now. As she lunged toward Dr. Ellis, Zharna moved instinctively, intercepting the attack with her own blade. The two Viridians stood locked in combat stance, the human protected behind Zharna. You defend the alien? Korak snarled, genuine surprise in her voice. Zharna herself was shocked by her action. The challenge is not complete, she said, the excuse sounding hollow even to her own ears. It is over, Korak declared, backing away. Guards, arrest the human for interference in sacred combat. Council guards moved forward, but Zharna maintained her protective stance. She has shown us truths we have hidden from ourselves. Is that not the purpose of spiritual combat? The purpose is to determine the stronger warrior, Korak countered, and clearly, neither of us can claim victory while under this alien influence. The Grand Counselor stepped forward from where he had been observing. The challenge must be completed. Our laws are absolute. If spiritual combat has been interrupted, then you must return to traditional methods. Combat with blades. To submission or death. Dr. Ellis spoke up, her voice calm despite the danger. Or you could choose another way. Break the cycle. Show true strength by rejecting unnecessary violence. Korak laughed bitterly. And become like humans. Weak, emotional creatures who cower behind words. Strong enough to face our own failings, Dr. Ellis replied. Strong enough to change when we recognize we're wrong. For a moment, silence hung in the chamber. Then Korak raised her blade again. Enough talk. Zharna, I will meet you in the Danteum at sunset. We finish this as Viridians should, with honor and blood. As Korak stormed out, flanked by guards, Zharna turned to the human. You should not have interfered. Yet you protected me, Dr. Ellis observed. Why? Zharna had no answer, at least, none she was prepared to acknowledge. Instead, she asked, how did you know about Lyran? About what I felt? The neural connection works both ways, the human explained gently. While you saw my memories of Earth, I glimpsed the wounds you carry. Your sister's death wasn't just a trial. It was the moment something essential was torn from you. Zharna turned away, uncomfortable with the human's perception. It doesn't matter now. I must prepare to face Korak. There's another option, Dr. Ellis said. We can complete the spiritual combat, just you and I. No interference from Korak or the Council. To what end? To heal, the human replied simply. To fill the void not with more violence, but with understanding. Zharna hesitated. Everything in her training rejected such a notion. Warriors did not heal. They conquered. They did not understand. They dominated. Yet the brief glimpse into the human's mind had awakened questions she could no longer silence. How would this be done? My ship contains more advanced neural interface technology than what's available here. Dr. Ellis explained. It would allow a deeper connection, one that could help you integrate the fragmented parts of yourself. The Council would never permit it. Then we don't ask permission. The human's eyes held a challenge of their own. Unless the great undefeated warrior fears defying convention. Despite herself, Zharna felt a smile tug at her lips, the first in longer than she could remember. You manipulate well for a species that claims to value honesty. Sometimes the truth needs a strategic approach, Dr. Ellis replied with a small smile of her own. Zharna made her decision. I will come to your ship, but know this, human, if I sense deception, my blades will find your heart before you can blink. I understand, Dr. Ellis nodded. And my name is Mara. If we're going to share minds again, we might as well use names. Mara, Zharna repeated, the foreign name strange on her tongue. I will find you after the gathering of the second moon. As Zharna left the chamber, her mind was in turmoil. For the first time in her life, she was considering defying not just the Council, but the very foundations of Viridian society. All because of a human who had glimpsed her deepest wound and offered not exploitation, but healing. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, beneath the confusion and resistance, she felt something that had been absent for 52 victories. Hope. When the second moon rose, casting its pale green light over Viridian Prime, Zharna slipped away from the warrior spire. She had left a message indicating she was in deep meditation before her combat with Korak, a common practice that would ensure she remained undisturbed until sunrise. Dr. Mara Ellis's ship was docked in the diplomatic quarter, a small vessel compared to the massive Viridian warships that dominated the spaceport. Its design was elegant rather than intimidating. Curves instead of the sharp angles preferred by Viridian engineers. The human was waiting at the entry hatch, her expression solemn. You came. I said I would, Zharna replied, glancing around to ensure they weren't observed. We must be quick. Korak has spies everywhere. Inside, the ship was surprisingly spacious, with warm lighting that contrasted sharply with the harsh illumination of Viridian structures. In the center of what appeared to be the main living area, 2 reclined chairs had been prepared, similar to those in the Danteum's neural chamber but more sophisticated. Earth technology, Mara explained, gesturing to the neural interface. We've developed more nuanced approaches to consciousness exploration. Your species seems obsessed with minds, Zharna observed, examining the equipment with professional curiosity. We Viridians focus on perfecting the body, yet the mind controls the body, Mara countered, and yours has been conditioned to reject certain aspects of itself. Zharna stiffened. You presume much. I observed much, Mara corrected gently. The neural connection showed me how Viridian training systematically suppresses emotional responses deemed weak, compassion, grief, love. But suppression isn't elimination. Those emotions remain, buried beneath layers of conditioning. And you believe this? Exploration will help me defeat Korak? Zharna asked, still seeking a warrior's justification for what felt increasingly like heresy. Mara's expression grew serious. I believe it will help you understand why defeating Korak in combat won't fill the void inside you. Nothing will, until you reconcile with what was taken from you, with who was taken. Lyrin. Even the thought of her twin's name sent a shock of pain through Zharna. Pain she had been trained to interpret as weakness, as failure. Sit, Mara said, gesturing to one of the chairs. This time, the connection will be deeper, more direct. I'll guide you, but ultimately, you'll be facing your own mind. Zharna hesitated only briefly before taking her seat. As Mara attached the neural interfaces, much smaller and more comfortable than the Viridian versions, she asked, Why are you doing this? What does Earth gain from interfering in Viridian affairs? Mara's hands paused in their work. Officially, Earth is concerned about Viridian expansion. Your empire has conquered 12 systems in the past decade alone. We hope to understand your culture better to facilitate peaceful relations. And unofficially, a sad smile crossed Mara's face. I've spent my career studying species that have weaponized their own development. The Viridian Empire represents the logical extreme, a society that has elevated combat to religion while systematically purging the very emotions that make sentient life meaningful. I want to prove that change is possible, even in the most militant cultures. You think to change an entire empire through one warrior? Jar-Na scoffed. I think great changes often begin with a single mind, opening to new possibilities. Mara replied, completing the neural connections. Ready? Jar-Na nodded, and the world once again dissolved around her. This time, there was no neutral landscape. Instead, Jar-Na found herself standing in the training pit where Lyran had died, but now she was observing from outside her body, watching her 8-cycle-old self holding the bloodied training blade, tears streaming down her young face despite the training master's disapproving glare. This is where it began. Mara's voice came from beside her, though the human's form was translucent, ghost-like. The fracturing of your psyche. It was necessary, Jar-Na heard herself say, the justification automatic after so many years. Only the strongest survived to serve the Empire. Was it necessary, Mara challenged, or was it convenient for a system that requires unquestioning obedience? The scene shifted. Now they watched as young Jar-Na was taken to the conditioning chambers, sterile rooms where neural reconfigurations were performed on promising warriors. Jar-Na had almost forgotten this part, how they had strapped her down, inserted neural suppressors, and systematically burned away her grief over Lyran's death. They told me it was an honor, Jar-Na whispered, watching her younger self scream as the machines rewired her brain. That only the finest warriors received such enhancements. They took your pain, Mara said softly, but also your capacity for connection. One cannot exist without the other. The scenes continued to unfold. Jar-Na's first real combat, her rise through the ranks, each victory hollow, yet driving her forward toward some undefined goal. She watched herself become colder, more efficient, more perfectly Viridian with each passing cycle. Enough, Jar-Na finally said. I understand what you're showing me. They molded me into the perfect weapon. Not quite, Mara replied. The mental landscape shifted again, but instead of another memory, they stood in darkness. Gradually, a figure took shape before them, another Jar-Na, but different. Softer features, gentler eyes, wearing simple civilian clothes rather than warrior's armor. What is this? Jar-Na demanded, unnerved by the doppelganger. This is who you might have been, Mara explained. The self that was never allowed to develop. The Jar-Na who mourned her sister, who questioned the cost of victory, who sought connection rather than conquest. The other Jar-Na spoke, her voice eerily similar, yet inflected differently. I've been here all along, buried beneath the warrior. Every time you felt empty after a victory, every time you stared at the stars and wondered what lay beyond endless combat, that was me, trying to reach you. Jar-Na felt a surge of anger. This is manipulation. You're trying to weaken me before my combat with Korak. I'm trying to make you whole, Mara countered. The Viridian Empire took half of you when they forced you to kill Lyran. Then they took the other half when they conditioned you to forget her. What remains is a fragment. Powerful, yes, but incomplete. The alternate Jar-Na stepped forward, hand outstretched. We can be whole again, not by defeating Korak, not by becoming Supreme Warrior, but by remembering what we lost, by honoring Lyran's memory instead of burying it. Jarna felt something breaking inside her, not a shattering, but a crumbling of walls long maintained. Behind those walls surged emotions so powerful she could barely withstand them. Grief for her sister, rage at the system that had forced her hand, longing for a life never permitted to exist. "It hurts," she gasped, falling to her knees in the mental landscape. "Yes," Mara said, kneeling beside her. "That's how you know it's real. Pain is the price of becoming whole again." The alternate Jarna knelt too, still reaching out. "Take my hand. Accept what they tried to make you forget." Trembling, Jarna reached out. As their fingers touched, a flood of memories washed over her, not just of Lyrin's death, but of their life together, playing as children before the training began, whispering secrets in their shared quarters, promising to always protect each other, no matter what. "I failed her," Jarna sobbed, the admission tearing from some long-sealed chamber of her heart. "The system failed you both," Mara corrected gently, as Jarna's hand fully clasped her alternate selves. A blinding light enveloped them. For a moment, there was only white, pure, painless, complete. Then, gradually, Jarna felt herself returning to physical awareness, the neural interface disconnecting. She opened her eyes to find Mara watching her with concern. "What happened?" the human asked. The connection became so intense that the system nearly overloaded. Jarna sat up slowly, feeling strangely light, as if some immense weight had been lifted from her. "I remembered," she said simply. "Everything they made me forget. Everything I made myself forget." Mara nodded. "Integration of suppressed aspects can be overwhelming. How do you feel?" It was a question no one had asked Jarna in years, perhaps ever. Warriors didn't have feelings. They had objectives, strategies, victories. Yet now, "I feel alive," she answered, surprising herself with the truth of it. "For the first time since Lyrin died, I feel present in my own existence." A small smile touched Mara's lips. "That's a start." "But what now?" Jarna asked, sudden uncertainty flooding her. "I am still expected to face Korak at sunrise. The entire Empire will be watching." "What do you want to happen?" Mara asked. Another question no one had ever posed to her. What did she want? Warriors didn't want. They obeyed. They conquered. They served the Empire. Yet as she searched her newly integrated consciousness, Jarna found an answer emerging with startling clarity. "I want to break the cycle. I want no more children to face what Lyrin and I faced. I want—" She stopped, almost afraid to voice the thought. "Go on," Mara encouraged. "I want to show them another way to be strong." Jarna finished quietly. Mara's expression grew solemn. "That won't be easy. Systems resist change, especially ones built on centuries of tradition." "Nothing worthwhile is easy," Jarna replied, echoing a Viridian proverb usually applied to combat training. Before they could discuss further, an alarm blared throughout the ship. Mara rushed to a control panel. "We've been discovered. Security forces are surrounding the diplomatic quarter." Jarna moved to the viewport and saw Viridian guards approaching, led by none other than Korak herself. "She must have suspected I would come here." "What now?" Mara asked, tension evident in her voice. Jarna considered their options. Escape was impossible, even if they managed to launch. Viridian defense systems would disable the ship before it cleared the atmosphere. Fighting would only confirm the Empire's view of humans as a threat. "We face them," she decided, "but on our terms, not theirs." As the first pounding came at the ship's entry hatch, Jarna turned to Mara. "I need one more thing from you." "Name it." "The recording of our neural session. Can you transmit it to the Danteum's public viewing screens? Mara's eyes widened. The entire neural experience that would expose everything, Zharna finished. The conditioning, the suppression, the truth about how warriors are made. Yes, it would change everything, Mara warned. That's the point. The pounding at the hatch grew more insistent. Voices demanded they surrender immediately. Mara hesitated only briefly before nodding. It will take time to process the neural data for transmission, maybe 20 minutes. And I'll need access to the Danteum's broadcast system. I can get you that access, Zharna assured her. But first, we need to survive the next few minutes. She moved toward the hatch. Follow my lead, and whatever happens, show no fear. Viridians respect courage above all else. With that, she released the lock. The hatch swung open to reveal Korak flanked by elite guards, all with weapons drawn. Traitor, Korak spat, consorting with aliens on the eve of sacred combat. Zharna stepped forward, unarmed, her posture relaxed but dignified. I sought understanding. General, something our empire has forgotten in its worship of strength. Arrest them both, Korak ordered. The human for interference, and the traitor for her heresy. As guards moved forward, Zharna spoke clearly, invoking ancient law. I claim the right of public challenge. Let my actions be judged not in secret chambers, but before all Viridians. The guards hesitated, looking to Korak. Public challenge was rarely invoked, but deeply respected. A warrior's right to have their fate decided by the collective judgment of their peers rather than by authorities. Korak's eyes narrowed. You think to use our traditions to escape justice? I think to honor the true spirit of those traditions, Zharna countered, unless you fear what might be revealed in public. It was a direct challenge to Korak's courage, something no Viridian warrior could ignore without losing face. After a tense moment, she nodded sharply. So be it. You will face judgment in the Danteum at sunrise, as planned. But instead of honorable combat, you will stand trial before the Empire. And the human comes with me, Zharna stipulated, as witness and advisor, according to the rights of the accused. Korak glared at Mara with undisguised contempt, but nodded again. Very well. But you will both be held under guard until sunrise. As they were escorted from the ship, Zharna caught Mara's eye. A silent understanding passed between them. They had until sunrise to prepare for a battle unlike any the Danteum had ever witnessed. Not a battle of blades, but of truth against tradition, of healing against power. For the first time in her life, Zharna would fight not to take life, but to transform it. Dawn broke over Viridian Prime, bathing the Danteum in cold light. Word had spread overnight of the unprecedented situation. The undefeated champion accused of treason, a human permitted in sacred space. The ancient right of public challenge invoked. By sunrise, every seat in the massive arena was filled, with thousands more watching on public viewing screens throughout the Empire. Zharna stood in the center of the Danteum, unarmed but straight-backed. Beside her stood Mara, looking small but composed among the towering Viridians. Opposite them, Korak and the Grand Council sat in judgment, their elevated platforms symbolizing their authority. Zharna of Viridian Prime, the Grand Counselor began, his voice amplified to reach every corner of the arena. You stand accused of consorting with aliens against the interests of the Empire, abandoning sacred combat, and corrupting the warrior's path with foreign ideas. How do you answer these charges? The traditional response would be a simple denial and request for trial by combat. Instead, Zharna stepped forward and addressed not just the council, but the entire assembly. I answer with a question. She projected, her voice strong and clear. What is the purpose of a warrior? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was not the protocol. The Grand Counselor frowned. The purpose of a warrior is to serve the Empire through strength and victory. And what is the purpose of the Empire? Zharna pressed. Order, power, the advancement of the Viridian race, the counselor replied, increasingly discomfited by the direction of the exchange. Yet in pursuing these aims, we have sacrificed something essential. Zharna continued, something that makes victory meaningful. Korak stood, her patience clearly at an end. Enough philosophical nonsense. The charges are clear, and the evidence undeniable. You betrayed your oath as a warrior. I fulfilled my oath, Zharna countered, which is to protect the true strength of Viridian society. But that strength has been undermined by our own practices. She turned in a slow circle, addressing the entire assembly now. How many of you have lost siblings in the training pits? How many have had your grief conditioned out of you? Your questions silenced, your capacity for connection surgically removed, all in service to an ideal of strength that leaves us empty even in victory. A hush fell over the Danteum. These were dangerous words, heretical thoughts, yet no one interrupted. I was the perfect Viridian warrior. Zharna continued, undefeated in 52 trials, and yet each victory left me more hollow than the last. I thought defeating Korak, binding myself to the strongest, would finally fill the void. I was wrong. She gestured to Mara. This human showed me what our conditioning has cost us, not just individual warriors, but our entire society. Lies and manipulation, Korak snarled. The human has planted these ideas to weaken us before Earth's inevitable invasion. Mara spoke for the first time, her voice calm despite the hostility directed at her. If I wanted to weaken the Viridian Empire, I would encourage you to continue exactly as you are. A society that cannibalizes its own children's humanity will eventually collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. The Grand Counselor rose, clearly disturbed by the direction of the proceedings. These philosophical debates are irrelevant to the charges. Zharna, you have violated our most sacred. Let me show you. Zharna interrupted, a capital offense under normal circumstances. But these were not normal circumstances. Let me show all of you what the Empire has hidden from itself. She nodded to Mara, who produced a small device from her pocket. The human had been permitted to keep it after Viridian scans detected no weapons capability, just data storage and transmission functions. What is this? Demanded the Grand Counselor. Truth, Zharna replied simply. Mara activated the device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, on the massive viewing screens that surrounded the Danteum, images began to appear. Not external recordings, but the neural experience itself. Zharna's memories, her conditioning, her reconnection with her suppressed self, all displayed for the entire Empire to witness. Gasps echoed throughout the arena as Viridians saw the young Zharna forced to kill her twin, saw the clinical brutality of the conditioning process, saw the systematic destruction of a child's capacity to grieve, to question, to love. Stop this immediately, Korak commanded, but even the guards seemed transfixed by the images. The screens showed Zharna's hollow victories, her growing emptiness, and finally, her reconnection with her buried self, the self that remembered Lyran with love, rather than as a necessary sacrifice. When the transmission ended, the Danteum remained in shocked silence. Then, from somewhere in the upper tiers, a voice called out, I lost my brother in the third trial. Another voice joined. They took my daughter for neural reconditioning. She returned without her laugh. More voices rose, each sharing similar stories of loss, of pain conditioned away, of the price paid for Viridian's strength, stories that had never before been spoken aloud, much less in the sacred space of the Danteum. Korak's face contorted with rage and disbelief. Silence! This emotional display dishonors the Empire! But the voices continued, growing louder, more insistent. Decades, centuries of suppressed grief and questioning finding expression at last. The Grand Counselor raised his hands, struggling to restore order. This display changes nothing. The laws of Viridian are clear. Jar Na has violated. The laws were made by us, for us. Jar Na interrupted again. And they can be remade when they no longer serve our true strength. She turned to face Korak directly. You challenged me as your greatest enemy, but we are not enemies. General, we are both victims of the same system, a system that taught us to value domination over connection, victory over understanding. Korak's hand moved to her weapon. Pretty words cannot change our nature. We are warriors, born to conquer. We are Viridians, Jar Na corrected, born with the capacity for both strength and compassion. Our ancestors understood this. It's why spiritual combat existed alongside physical trials. Somewhere, we lost that balance. She took a step toward Korak, unarmed, open. I will not fight you today, General. Not with blades, not with neural links. Instead, I offer something no Viridian has offered another in generations: understanding. The Danteum held its collective breath as Jar Na extended her hand to her oldest rival. You carry your own wounds, your own conditioned suppressions. I've seen them in your mind. Let us both be free of them. For a long moment, Korak stood frozen, generations of conditioning warring with the truth she had just witnessed. Then, slowly, her hand moved away from her weapon. You speak of weakness, she said, but the conviction had drained from her voice. I speak of evolution, Jar Na replied. The next step in Viridian development, integration rather than suppression, connection rather than conquest. From the crowd, more voices called out in support. Not just ordinary citizens, but warriors too. Champions who had secretly carried the same emptiness Jar Na had exposed. The Grand Counselor looked around in growing alarm as the mood of the assembly shifted palpably. Order! I demand order! But a new chant had begun to ripple through the Danteum. Truth! 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 Mara stepped forward, addressing the council directly. Your empire stands at a crossroads. You can cling to traditions that slowly poison your society from within, or you can embrace change, not abandoning strength, but redefining it. The council members conferred urgently among themselves, clearly unprepared for this unprecedented situation. Finally, the Grand Counselor spoke, his voice less certain than before. These revelations require consideration. Until the Council reaches a decision, this assembly is suspended. No! Jar Na's voice rang out, stopping the counselor mid-stride as he attempted to exit. The right of public challenge means the people decide, here and now. She turned to the assembled Viridians, her gaze sweeping the massive arena. For too long, decisions about our society have been made by a few, based on traditions that serve their power rather than our collective well-being. Today, we reclaim that power. The crowd roared its approval. Even many of the guards had lowered their weapons, moved by the neural recordings and the courage of Jar Na's stand. Korak, watching her authority crumble, made one final attempt. She betrays everything we stand for. Our strength. Our superiority. True strength comes not from domination, but from integration, Zharna countered. Not from conquering others, but from understanding ourselves. She gestured to Mara. Humans like Dr. Ellis have mastered this understanding, while we remained trapped in outdated paradigms of power. They explore consciousness while we suppress it. They heal trauma while we inflict it. Which approach shows greater evolution? The council members looked at each other in confusion and growing alarm as their authority visibly eroded. The Grand Counselor made a desperate gesture to the elite guards. "Restore order! Arrest the dissident!" But the guards did not move. Many had seen their own experiences reflected in the neural recordings, the conditioning, the suppression, the emptiness of victory without meaning. Seeing the shift in power, Korak made a decision that surprised everyone. She stepped forward, not toward Zharna with aggression, but to stand beside her. "I have served the Empire for 40 cycles," she announced, her voice carrying throughout the Danteum. "I have led conquests, crushed rebellions, embodied Viridian strength as it was taught to me." She paused, visibly struggling with emotions long suppressed. "And I have felt the same emptiness after each victory." A collective gasp rippled through the assembly. For the legendary General Korak to admit such a thing was unprecedented. "Perhaps," Korak continued, "it is time to consider what strength truly means." The Grand Counselor, seeing his last support crumble, finally relented. "The Council will convene to discuss these matters. In the meantime, the right of public challenge has been invoked. Let the Assembly decide." The vote, when it came, was overwhelming. Viridians throughout the arena raised their ceremonial daggers, not in the traditional salute to victory, but turned downward, the ancient symbol for transformation and rebirth. Zharna stood in the center of the Danteum, Mara on one side, Korak on the other, human, reformer, and traditionalist united in a moment of profound change. "The Assembly has spoken," the Grand Counselor acknowledged reluctantly. "The charges against Zharna are dismissed. Furthermore, a Council of Reform shall be established to reevaluate certain practices." It was a small concession, carefully worded to maintain some semblance of authority, but everyone present understood the significance. The monolith of Viridian tradition had cracked, and through that crack, change would inevitably flow. As the formal proceedings concluded, Viridians did something unprecedented in the history of the Danteum. They remained, gathering in small groups, speaking openly of experiences long suppressed, sharing stories of loss and questioning that would have been treason just hours before. Mara watched in quiet amazement as the transformation unfolded. "You've started something remarkable," she said to Zharna. "A peaceful revolution." Zharna shook her head. "Not started. Continued. This change has been brewing for generations, beneath the surface of our conditioning. All I did was give it voice." Korak, still adjusting to the seismic shift in her worldview, asked Mara, "What happens now? Will Earth seek alliance with a transformed Viridian Empire?" "That will be for diplomats to decide," Mara replied. "My mission was to understand, not to negotiate." "And have you understood us, human?" Korak asked, a hint of her old challenge in the question. Mara smiled. "I've glimpsed the beginning of understanding. The rest will take time." Over the following days, the Danteum underwent a transformation as profound as the society it represented. The combat pits were repurposed into discussion forums. The neural technology once used for conditioning was reprogrammed to facilitate healing and integration. Warriors became teachers, sharing combat skills not for domination, but for protection and personal development. Zharna declined the title of Supreme Warrior, proposing instead a new designation: Guardian of Freedom. Her first act in this role was to establish a memorial for all those lost in the training pits, with Lyran's name first among them. Korak, to everyone's surprise, became one of the most vocal advocates for reform. Her decades of experience gave her insights into which traditions could be preserved and which needed to evolve. Together with Zharna, she helped create a new model of Viridian strength, one that integrated martial prowess with emotional intelligence, conquest with cooperation. 1 month after the watershed moment in the Danteum, Mara prepared to return to Earth. Her diplomatic mission had been extended to document the ongoing transformation of Viridian society. But now other xenopsychologists would continue the work. Zharna accompanied her to the spaceport, the two having formed a bond that transcended species. "You transformed our entire society," Zharna observed as they walked through gardens newly planted around the once stark landing pads. "No," Mara corrected gently. "You transformed it. I just asked questions you'd never been permitted to consider." Zharna smiled, an expression that had become increasingly natural over the past weeks. "Either way, the Viridian Empire will never be the same. The Council of Reform has already abolished compulsory combat training for children. Families are being reunited. Warriors are learning to integrate their suppressed emotions." "And you?" Mara asked. "How are you integrating yours?" Zharna looked toward the horizon, where the Danteum, now renamed the Hall of Integration, stood against the skyline. "Each day brings new discoveries. Yesterday, I laughed for the first time since childhood. The day before, I wept for Lyrin without shame. It is unsettling and beautiful simultaneously." They reached Mara's ship, where a small delegation of Viridian officials waited to bid the human farewell. Among them stood Korak, now serving as liaison between the reformers and traditionalists. "Dr. Ellis," the general acknowledged with newfound respect. "Earth has proven itself powerful in ways we never considered. You conquered without weapons." "Not conquest," Mara corrected. "Connection. There's a difference." Korak nodded thoughtfully, a distinction we are learning to appreciate. As final preparations for departure were completed, Zharna and Mara stood aside for a private farewell. "Will you return to Viridian Prime?" Zharna asked. "I hope to," Mara replied. "My report will undoubtedly create quite a stir on Earth, a peaceful revolution in the galaxy's most militant empire. Diplomatic relations will likely expand significantly." "And beyond diplomacy," Zharna pressed, "will you return as Mara?" The human smiled, recognizing the personal nature of the question. "Yes, there's still much to learn from each other." Zharna hesitated, then reached out in the human gesture Mara had taught her, an embrace. As they held each other briefly, Zharna whispered, "Thank you for helping me find what no victory could provide." "And what was that?" Mara asked softly. "Myself," Zharna replied. "The self I was never permitted to become. Until now." As Mara's ship lifted off, Zharna stood with Korak, watching until it vanished into the upper atmosphere. Around them, Viridian Prime pulsed with new energy, not the cold metallic efficiency of before, but something warmer, more organic, more alive. "You once offered to bind yourself to the strongest," Zharna remarked to Korak. "Does that offer still stand?" Korak considered the question with new depth. "I think we have redefined what strongest means, and in that new definition, perhaps we are bound to each other already, not in subservience, but in mutual growth." Zharna nodded, satisfied with the answer. Together, they turned back toward the city that was transforming before their eyes. The Viridian Empire was evolving, integrating the strength of its warrior traditions with the wisdom of emotional intelligence. It would be a long process, with setbacks and resistance, but the path had been opened, and it had all begun with a simple truth, that the strongest warrior was not the one who conquered others, but the one who conquered the conditioning that limited her own humanity. As Jarna walked through the streets of her changing world, she felt Lyran's presence, not as a painful memory to be suppressed, but as a beloved part of herself, integrated at last into the whole. For the first time since she was 8 cycles old, Jarna felt complete, not empty, not hollow, but filled with possibilities that no battlefield could ever provide. The warrior had found her true strength, and with it, her freedom.